Hello, I'm Kwame Innis, and welcome to the People's Forum. Welcome back. I'm chomping at the bit here. I'm excited. We have an extremely important topic. The topic is immigration, legal or illegal, what our stance is. We have a phenomenal panel here. We have Mr. Robert Hornak, the former director of the Republican Party in Queens, New York.
Thank you.
Sitting next to him is Mr. Rafael Pazmino. Excuse me, Rafael, pardon me for that. He's an attorney here in New York City. And next to him is Ms. Patrica Smith, former ACS supervisor and social worker.
Thank you.
Here we go. We're going to get right into it. I need to know, first of all, what your thoughts are on immigration, legal versus illegal. This is pretty much a legal question. Rafi, can you take that, please?
Yeah, I mean, legal or illegal, the big question that's surrounding us now in this country is what do we do with all these kids that are coming into the country illegally? And how do we try to legalize them? And there are a lot of mechanisms to do that. One is obviously what they're doing now is asylum or the special immigrant juvenile application where a guardian can seek a petition, a person could seek a petition for guardianship and the child will get the green card automatically. Those are the two avenues on that situation. The other is all the folks that are here illegally, how do they legalize? There are a couple of ways to do that, but I guess we'll talk about that here.
That's what I want to do. That I jumped the gun a little. I'm always very anxious when it comes to exciting topics. But what currently is the policy here in the United States for immigration? I'm talking about to our southern border, to our northern border, and overseas.
Okay, very simple. Overseas folks that come in with a tourist visa, even Canada, they marry a U.S. citizen, they could stay. Within 6 months, they'll do a 485 application called adjustment of status to adjust their status from tourist to green card holder. Mm-hmm. That process takes 6 to 8 months, and they have to marry a U.S. citizen. Usually, folks from Europe, China, Asia, they come in with a tourist visa, and they can easily adjust marrying a U.S. citizen. Now, someone crossing illegally that's here, marry a U.S. citizen, they don't qualify for that type of adjustment here in the United States. They have to go back to their country. The old rule was that they would have to wait
10 years.
Right. But under President Obama, he created something called the Provisional Waiver, a 601A, where basically if it's approved here, you go back to your native country and you're back in 30 days. So that's still in place now. It's called an I-601A waiver.
Question, is that a reality or is that a fantasy?
Well, it's a reality. I've gotten some approved. The problem that we're having now is that there are people that are in immigration proceedings as we speak. And under President Obama and Eric Holder, he instructed the prosecutors to basically do a termination of proceedings. When the proceedings would be terminated, they would go back and come back. Now that option is not available, and that's the problem we're having with folks that are in proceedings. So even if the waiver is approved, they're not terminating proceedings in immigration court. They're going to have to do voluntary departure, and they might be forced to stay 1 to 10 years overseas. And that's something that we're encountering for the last few months. So how that's playing out now, I don't know what we're going to do there.
In one of our last shows, we had to go on record to say that the immigration process in the United States is broken. Do you agree with that?
I think there are mechanisms that we could use to try to fix it, and there are a lot of ways to do that. There's one procedure in immigration court that a lot of people don't know about. It's basically if you're here for 10 years or greater, and you have a qualifying relative, a wife, a parent, or your child being a resident or a citizen, you could qualify for a green card.
Yes.
Yeah, the problem is hardship. You have to prove an exceptional hardship on the American going back to your native country.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because that brings us to our president, Mr. Donald Trump. I've got something to put on the screen, and I would like you guys to get a look at it because this was a statement that the president made approximately a week ago. Maybe less than that. He was in the United Kingdom with the Theresa May, and he made this statement. I just think it's changing the culture. I think it is a very negative thing for Europe. I think it's very negative. not to misquote him, I have a second one. Allowing the immigration to take place in Europe is a shame. Trump said, I think it changed the fabric of Europe, and unless you act very quickly, it will never going to be the same the way it was. I don't mean that in a positive way. So I think allowing millions and millions of people to come to Europe is very, very sad. I think you're losing your culture. Is that a fair statement to be made by the President of the United States, a country that we have a Statue of Liberty, right here in our ocean? Bring us, you're hungry, you're poor, you're meek.
Well, may I jump in?
Please.
What President Trump is specifically speaking to there is the huge wave of Muslim immigrants that are going into Central Europe and causing a tremendous amount of conflict. If you look at all of the countries that have taken in large numbers of Muslim immigrants, whether it's England, France, Germany, they're all having revolts because the people are not, in America, we believe in, you come to America, you're an immigrant, we welcome you, but we want you to assimilate and become an American. In Europe, they're not doing that, and they're not even encouraging that.
I have a question, Robert. What does that mean? What is an American? Please.
Well, it's a very amorphous concept. Our identity is constantly changing because of immigration, and that's actually, I think, a very good thing.
So then
we absorb the best that the world has to offer and incorporate that into our culture.
I think that's an idealistic thing, the best. Sometimes people aren't doing their best. Many of these people from these regions are fleeing poverty, they're fleeing war, they're fleeing starvation, they're fleeing things for a reason. And the countries where they have stability, they're not coming here. They're very, very comfortable. They might come here, as you said, on an education visa. They get a 4-year, 6-year PhD degree, and then they're going home to make changes. The people that are coming here to feed their families and assist their families, this is life and death. This is not a game. It's either stay at home and die or come here and live.
That's true. But here's the thing. We have to be able to control our borders. And ultimately, as a nation, we need to decide who we're going to allow in. If we just say everybody that's under dire circumstances where they live is welcome to come here, the entire world would come here. We certainly could not accommodate the hundreds of millions of people immigrating into this country. And that's what the concept of open borders would eventually lead to.
I understand what you're saying. No one's asking for an open border, but I think the statistics malign exactly what you're saying. Our number one source country, according to the statistics of 2017, is Southeast Asia and East Asia.
Yes.
That's number one. We don't have any security issues. People fly in, via jetliners, JFK, all the such. So can you speak to that?
Well, I'm not saying that shouldn't be the case. We welcome that immigration. A lot of those people are coming over on the H-1B visas. They're coming over to work in internet companies and technology and medicine. But there are people that are coming over who have lower level skills, and they're certainly welcome here. We welcome and have always welcomed people of all skill levels and of all backgrounds. But we have always historically encouraged them to assimilate, to learn the language, to learn the culture, and to find a way to carve a niche out. Even if they formed, everybody when they've come over, whether they were Italians, Jews, whomever, they formed little ghettos when they first got here, but they found a way to assimilate their culture into ours. And their culture was not the same as the Americans who were here before them, but it also wasn't the same as where they came from either. It was something in between. It became a hybrid.
America's a quilt. We're a patchwork of different nations, different ethnicities, different religions, and they're supposed to be able to come here and be comfortable and not be persecuted.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. I mean, don't mistake what I said earlier about us taking in the best the world has to offer to mean that we only take in people of accomplishment. That's not what I meant. What I meant by the best the world has to offer is all different cultures, a wide variety of experiences, and people that can bring the way that they've lived into our culture and make it part of our culture. It doesn't have to be highbrow to be welcome. It can be some of our greatest history in this country originated from the masses, originated from people that were struggling, whether it was food or customs or whatever. The best that we appreciate here in this country, I think, has risen up from that which people created out of struggle.
I'm not going to let previous presidents off the hook. We've been pretty cruel and pretty mean in our administration of these policies. Some of these policies are based on religion. If you're from a Muslim country, they were talking about banning people from Muslim countries. All Muslim people in Muslim countries don't agree with their government because all Muslim or Christian people here in America don't agree with the government. But we put them in a corner and say that what your president may have been doing is what you want him to do. All Saddam's people were supposed to be being freed from tyranny, but I have statistics here that says less than 50% of them even get visas at the consulate in their countries. And that's a problem. That's unfair.
Yeah, it is.
How do you get out of a war-torn region if you can't even get a visa to get on the plane?
Kwame, there's a very complex dynamic problem going on in the world. And I'm not saying I have the answer to this, but here's what happens. You look at countries like Syria. You've got very moderate Muslims that live there. You've got very radical Muslims, and they're clashing. That's what the fight is often between in the Middle East, between the moderates and the extremists. It would be great if we said to all of the moderates, you're welcome to come here to America and we will provide you with a new home. And I don't really have a problem with doing that. But the problem then, what you find is that you leave behind a country that is so radicalized that it becomes a threat to its neighbors and a threat to its region. So the ultimate answer, I don't know, is do you bring those people here to allow them to flourish in a safe environment? Or do we encourage the conflict, if you will, to try to create a balance between the radical and the moderate? I don't have the answer to that question. It's a very complex one.
Do you think you might have an answer for that, Ralph?
Well, look, all that stuff is a U.S. consulate. They decide who comes, how many visas are issued. You can't even go to court to debate that. That's the problem.
The quotas for African countries, both sub-Saharan and Northern African countries, the quotas for Central American countries, the quotas for many of the islands are 10% of what the quotas are to some other countries. And that's strictly based on ethnicity, religion, and race and economic ability. We have a place, a wonderful place that I've actually visited called Cuba. 75% of the visa applications are denied at the consulate, and all the people don't agree with the government, and that's simply not fair.
Well, it's also not fair, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have an open immigration system or accepting immigration system. We should. And maybe ultimately we need to look at the quotas that we have and raise them. Maybe one of the things we could do to alleviate the pressure on illegal immigration is to increase legal immigration. That might be a solution that could work. But what's not fair to anybody is to allow this hybrid system where people that want to come here legally go through the process. They could spend...
Robert, I'm going to have to halt you. We're going to cut to you when we come right back.
Okay.
When we come back, we're going to finish with Robert's statement, and we're going to deal with DACA. We're going to have Ms. Patrica Smith, who's a social worker, talk about what the route is for those children, and we're going to get more into it.
Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why did the girl ask the mushroom to dance? Because he was a fun guy. What do you call a pig that knows karate? Pork chop. So how does a tissue dance? Put a little boogie on it.
Okay, welcome back. Before we left for a break, Mr. Hornak was continuing. Please, Robert, go ahead.
What I was saying was what's not fair to anybody is to have this hybrid system where we have illegal immigration system where people who want to do it the right way, go through the process. It could take them years and years and tremendous expense to come to this country legally. And then we have this second, almost like a lottery system where you come here illegally and, well, we're just going to turn a blind eye to that and we're going to let you go off and do whatever it is you want to do. And granted, you're forfeiting certain advantages of being a legal immigrant, but you're here in this country. And the people that come here through the legal process resent that because they have gone through that process And they don't want to see the system being short-circuited, the line essentially being cut by people who think that they have a right to come here whenever they want. We also don't have the ability to screen those people and say, are you a criminal where you came from? Were you a child abuser? Are you tied to a terrorist organization? Those are the people we ultimately want to keep out. And we don't have the ability to do that if we're just going to allow tremendous amounts of illegal immigration to come.
But the vast majority of those people aren't tied to
No.
terrorist organizations.
And I'm not insinuating that they are.
They aren't criminals. The vast majority of those people are families looking for a better way of life.
Absolutely.
They're looking for food, clothing, and shelter. They're looking for education and upward mobility for their children. They're here searching for the American dream.
Yes, and I want them to
sell
come.
that dream worldwide. We sell that dream. But when
We do.
people come here to take us up on the offer, then we want to renege.
Well, I don't think we should be reneging. Like I said, I think we should be looking at increasing our quotas. I don't think our levels are
I want to speak.
high enough.
I want to speak to one of the elephants in the room, and that is Mexico, Central South America. What's going on right now with many of these, young people, children, mothers and fathers carrying infants and babies, teenagers being sent off with a backpack and a couple of $100s and a phone number and told, find your aunt in California. I want to speak to that because those people are being stopped in Arizona, in New Mexico, in Texas, and they're being put through a horrible, horrible, horrible gauntlet. Many times only to be sent back and face the same persecution and or death that they were running from. Can you please speak about that?
Many of these families are really seeking asylum from the countries that they come from of origin. They have already gone through such horrible situations in their countries, and sometimes they narrowly escape their country to come to the United States, where they see the United States as a place of refuge. And the ones that are really suffering right now are the children. The children are being separated from the parent or from the mother. This new policy that we have that was done by Donald Trump, recently I think they failed to meet the deadline to return the children. I don't know how many exactly children will not return at this point, but they did not reach the deadline to return all the children back to the parents. And one of the things that we're having is that these children, the short-term effect on these children is great. They are unfortunately not able to cope with being separated from their parent. They are in a situation where they are identifying with whoever they can identify with, adults who are not their parent, just to survive.
I want to allow Ralph to speak to our legal responsibility
Yes.
to the children and how long they're allowed to keep the families.
Well, if they come in as unaccompanied minors, they have to try to locate their family. So what's happening now is they contact a family member, they go to the facility and pick the child up. Generally, I know the rules. The problem is a lot of them are coming with their parents, as she's indicated, or an aunt, uncle, and they're being separated. The American government sometimes takes the position, even that being, or call the uncle, as you said earlier, who's the uncle? Where are we sending this child to? Because we have a responsibility. But they do release them, and then the child, when they come out, they can seek asylum or guardianship through their uncle. Now, it doesn't matter what the legal status of that uncle or aunt is. As long as they don't need a legal status. They go to a state court here in New York. They go to a state court, juvenile court, and the judge will give them guardianship with that letter and that certification. You apply for special immigrant juvenile in the immigration court under a form I-360. That the only requirement is that state order providing, and it goes through a social worker and items and stuff like that. So once that occurs, the child gets a green card. It's a 2 to 4 year process, roughly, and it's until the child will age out in New York at 21. So you have 20-year-olds that come across the border and could do that. As long as you come in and the state order is before 21, you could get it. Even though as you indicated, the immigration system is broken because of longevity of the application. It might take longer. They can be 24, but as long as they do it before 21, it's fine.
Robert, what's your position on this?
Well, my heart breaks for these kids. It really does. But we also have to realize that the adults that are bringing these kids across the border are doing so in a manner that risks their lives. A lot of these kids actually die in transit because they're coming through a desert, they're lacking food and water, and they don't actually make it across. The ones that do make it across, they're being apprehended by Border Patrol. Now, the change that the Trump administration made, and I think rightly so, was that if we catch you coming across the border illegally, we're not going to do catch and release anymore. We're not just going to give you essentially a ticket and a court date and say come back in 6 months, because they never come back. So what they're doing is they're actually prosecuting, particularly if they're repeat offenders, if they've tried to cross the border illegally previously, they're going to be prosecuted. They're held in detention. Now, according to a court decision that was rendered back in the Clinton administration, the children, and you can confirm this, cannot be held for more than 20 days, because the children aren't being charged with anything. So to keep the children in criminal detention with the parents, I think would be immoral. That's why the children are being separated. They can't be held for more than 20 days, and they really can't be held in criminal detention with the parents. So they're being taken charge of by Health and Human Services and being treated like any child that ACS took away from abusive parents would be treated. They're being put up in temporary homes with guardians, and they're being given very good treatment, food and shelter and whatever they need. So they're not being abused. It might be traumatic for them to be separated from their parents, and certainly I can grieve for them for that. That's not their fault, but it is their parents' fault, and their parents risked their children's lives. Maybe you would say, and I would not disagree with you, that they were coming from a life or death situation to begin with. But they should have, if they were legitimate candidates for asylum, they should have applied legally for asylum, and then they would have gone through the asylum process, which is very different from the process they're going through now, which is coming across the border illegally and being detained and prosecuted.
Let me say, these families are drowning. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a drowning family in the water, and they're treading water, and they've been out there hours, and they're cramping up,
Well, throw them a lifeline.
You need to throw them a lifeline.
Yes.
You can't ask them, oh, could you just hold on another 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, and I'm not asking them to. I'm just saying there's a process. If you're a legitimate
But the process
candidate,
isn't working. That's the problem. The process obviously isn't working. We're in a disaster area right now. We're in crisis. The country is in crisis. So obviously we have to look at the situation that the process that exists at this moment isn't working for those people who are drowning. And we have too many people coming in from those countries or same countries that are really coming here for asylum and they're fleeing severe, dangerous situations.
like I said, if they are legitimate candidates for asylum, they are being put through an asylum process, and they get a hearing and they get care. They are not being locked up, and they're not being separated from their children. If they're legitimate candidates or they legitimately apply for asylum, it's only when they come across the border illegally and then ask for asylum once they get caught that they go through this alternate process. Now, maybe that doesn't work for them, but at the end of the day, we have to be a country of rules and laws. We have to have a process. Otherwise, it's anarchy, and everybody just comes as they want.
Before I move to the next topic, I want to say one thing. If these countries, Central and South America, are continuously destabilized and continuously in economic turmoil, we haven't spoken about the drug issue in terms of marijuana, cocaine, heroin, and the gangs and how they really rule a lot of these smaller areas. What do you expect people to do? When Mexico is doing well, as it states here in 2015, from 2001 to 2015, the number of immigrants that came to this country from Mexico dropped almost in half, from 52% to 28%. That's because the country started to do better. When the country does better and offers opportunity, people stay home. Nobody wants to leave home. People who come here, even in my background from the West Indies, you come here, you work, you make enough money, and as soon as you're able to retire, You sell your house here, leave it to the kids, and you're going back home where you can sit with your friends and play dominoes. That's the American dream. That's what everyone wants to do.
Yes.
I've only got 4 minutes left, and I don't want to leave the DACA kids out. I think it's an extremely important topic. Can you please speak to DACA, Ralph?
Yeah, I know it wasn't renewed, my understanding. It's a problem with these kids. Under President Obama, it was approved. Now it's not, so they're going to be in limbo. What some of these kids did do, and I didn't have too many of those applications because fortunately, they came here when they were 2 or 3 years old. They speak perfect English and they could read and write, and they use their guidance counselors for those types of applications. I think I only did 2 or 3 of those. And they were approved. The issue that what a lot of them did was they would go overseas, do an educational type of excursion, so they would be paroled in, and through that they could marry a U.S. citizen because a lot of these kids came through the border. So, but that's a very small number. So I mean, I don't know what we're going to do now with them. They had an employment authorization card with a SOCH. Eventually, they can't renew that, and their concern is, will they be processed? I hope not.
Pat, can you speak to your experiences?
My experiences with these families, these children that are being forcibly separated. We're talking about DACA?
Yes.
Those young people with DACA are very sophisticated. They are American citizens, even though they didn't come in the correct way. Some of them were...
in Robert's word, they've assimilated.
They're
They've been to
assimilated.
school here.
Yes.
They
Yes.
played Little League.
Yes.
They've been in the Boy Scouts, and then all of a sudden they're
every
going to
way
be
possible.
uprooted and
And
sent
so-
to a country that they're not even familiar with.
Yes, and that's the problem, because for them to go back to a country they're not familiar with, they don't even speak the language, some of these young people, and that's the problem. They see themselves as Americans 100%, and they want to be Americans. So DACA, again, is a failed system that needs to be looked at and reformed.
Yeah, I agree with you. These kids should absolutely not be sent back. Speaking of this purely from a political perspective, a deal will be worked out. It's inevitable that something's going to happen. Nobody's going to let these kids be deported ultimately, because at the end of the day, they didn't assimilate. They were essentially grew up here. This is the only culture they know. They are Americans through and through.
Robert,
And,
once again, you are the victim of our station break. I'm sorry.
Good timing.
I'd like to wrap this up. The main thing that we have to recognize, I think, and search our conscience is countries like America, Great Britain, the colonial powers, the imperialist powers. I'm sorry, you're on the hook. You created these situations hundreds of years ago. You've benefited from these situations. And now that there are conflict zones all over the world, you can't say, oh, well, we need to revisit this. No, you have a responsibility to people. Ultimately, there's a humanitarian responsibility, and we need to live up to our words. Thank you very much. Once again, thank you guys for coming. It's been an exciting debate, and I'd like to have you back again soon. I'm Kwame Innis from the People's Forum. Once again, you can email us at peoplestalkforum@gmail.com. You can phone call us, area code 646-238-9808. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate if you'd like to come on the show or a topic that you'd like us to have, send us your comments. Thank you very much.